been a while since we've gone through this, and there were two teachings that I did. This being the later of the two prominent principle versus promise. Are you chasing the rain, R-A-I-N, or the rain, R-E-I-G-N? Are you chasing the rain or the rain? And the other teaching was sowing and reaping, understanding stewardship according to the scriptures. I'm going to kind of combine these two. And so let's begin just by defining here, what is principle? What is promise? What are these things? When we look at principle, and I'm not necessarily using a definition, but I'm using what can be considered examples of principle. Some things that we can tie in with principle to understand and know what a principle is. And so, in speaking of the first being precept, just simply a command. Precept. Precept. A law. A natural occurrence. Things that happen because they were set in the earth to happen. A principle. Basic things that it doesn't require salvation. It doesn't require even recognizing that there is an Elohim. You don't even have to recognize the fact that any God exists. And the principles are in the earth. The principles are in the earth. And then we look at the other side, which is promise. What is this? Wasn't it a promise that Yahweh made to his friend, to Abraham? Was it a promise when he went into covenant with his friend? Remember, he put him to sleep. He cut apart the pieces of this animal. And then he said of these animals, it was several different animals. And as the birds of prey came, Abraham would shoo them away. But when it was time to go into covenant, Yahweh could only swear by himself, and not even could he rely on his friend Abraham to uphold what needed to be upheld. And so he went into a covenant, and he made a promise to Abraham of what? Inheritance. Because he says, you will be the father of many nations. Changed his name from just Avram to Abraham. Being now the father of many nations. And so you look at now his children. He says all the families of the earth will be blessed. Why? Because you obeyed my Torah. Because you listened to me. Because you went into covenant with me. Because you did what I asked you to do. And that, in and of itself, allowed you certain privileges. Ooh, that word is misspelled. I thought I fixed that. Let me, oh man, they just got kicked off of this. Yeah, but, oh, you know what that means? That means that this is not the most recent one. I know I fixed it. But anyway, let me fix that real quick, y'all. I apologize for everyone in the Zoom. My computer seems to be going in and out of the Zoom, so I do apologize if you're getting the screen and then losing it and so on and so forth. But we'll try to, I'll talk through what's up there and we'll keep going. And so we see that there was a promise of an inheritance for a man, that he gave him a sign of this covenant, this promise. And so when you think about the privilege that comes with this promise goes beyond the simple principles that are placed in the earth. It goes beyond the norm. It goes beyond the planting and reaping. That he has allowed it to go past that. Is that spell correction too? Contingent. Yeah. Where's the... Sorry, y'all. Okay, I'm getting them back. There we go. Yeah, I think that was a spell correction. That wasn't the right word, so I apologize. Tell when you're rushing, trying to hurry up, huh? And so let's now take a look at some examples. Let's go through some examples of what this principle versus promise is. So, y'all remember this, kids, right? You know, stuff pops up, then you got to say where it goes. Would it go to the left or the right? You used to have to do a little arrow. Point the arrow in a different direction. And so as you point the arrow, we're going to go. All right, so, children, help me understand. The first one, food. Are your parents, by principle, should they feed you? Or is that just a promise, hey, you know, I like you, so I'll let you eat? Principle or promise?
Principle.
I think so. Now, Ruth's Chris, that is not a promise. I mean, that is not a principle. That's a promise. You operating under something a little extra there. All right, what about that? What about that? Shelter. Should your parents provide shelter for you? Principle or promise? But if you're grown, then it might be part of promise. But if you still coming up in life, making your way downtown, you know, walking fast, if you're still coming through the you know, the channel of life and still trying to figure it all out, you know, then okay, that might be a part of principle, right? All right, what about that? What about that?
A PlayStation 5.
Mm-hmm. PlayStation 5, is that promise? Is that like, I got to do that? I mean, is that principle? I keep saying backwards. That's a little extra, right? That's part of promise. That's like, you know, I love you, you've done well, and you know, I'll put a few dollars toward it. Make sure you got your other half. And I'm gonna be playing too. All right. Clothes. Cloths. I'm telling y'all, I was trying to fast. I don't know, man. I was tripping. Good gracious. Cloths are cloths and clothes part of principle or promise? Principle. Okay. So we should provide some clothing. Now I ain't say nothing about, you know, everything got to be coming from, you know, Saks Fifth Avenue, which is, you know, that ain't happening. No, we ain't talking about that. Nah, you're gonna have some items from Goodwill now. You're gonna have an item or two from, as my grandfather would call it, the Goodwill. You will have some items from there. All right, so where we at? Where we at? What about that? No. Expensive clothes, principle or promise? Promise. That's promise. That's a little extra. We done went into covenant when I got to spend that kind of money. You know, that's because you done did something right. You the child. You done did something right. What about shoes? Did I spell that right? Shoes.
Principle.
All right, shoes. Principle. You know, you got to have shoes on. You know, but I mean, do they got to be Jordans? No. That's part of promise. They ain't got to be Jordans. They just got to be shoes. They just got to cover your feet up. And I can do that in several different ways. We can accomplish that goal. So, you know, what about when Mickey like to come and shake you upside down and take all the money out your pocket? Is that part of principle of promise? You know? So, let's think about it in this perspective. Think about it in this way. When you have principle, that's probably more like the stuff, consider it like, you know, I do this principle, I do this for a friend, for a coworker, or, someone, a family member, you know. But the promise is much different because my child, and I know I just went to him jokingly, but my child is a part of my promise. And so the things that I would do for that person who I know from work wouldn't look the same as my child, right? And so think about it like this. Think about it like this. Friends get gifts. Sons get inheritances.
Yes.
Friends get gifts. You're nice, we're kind to each other. My birthday, you got me, you know, for 5 and below, what you call it, thingamabob. So, I got you a $5 thingamabob when it was your birthday. That's a part of principle. You sowed and now you reap it. Here you go, even. That's a friend. But a son receives an inheritance, not a gift. It's not simply a gift. I'll say it like that. It's not simply a gift. A son receives an inheritance. And so when you look at it like that, it's a little different. Let's see what else. A friend can come visit, right? A friend may even spend the night. Might even come visit you and stay for the week. But a son lives in the house. A son lives in the house. A son lives in the house. Let's take a look here. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 43 through 45. Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 through 45. Remember, we're talking about principle versus promise. I really want to remember what that last one was that I was trying to write, because it wasn't contingent. When I remembered, I'll tell you. So this reads, "You heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy." Said, not that it was actually written, but it was said. "But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those cursing you, do good to those hating you, and pray for those insulting you and persecuting you, so that you become sons of your Father in the heavens. Because he makes his sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous." This helps to very clearly give us what a principle looks like. It says that he makes his sun rise on the wicked and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So when the sun came up in Egypt, did it just come up for Goshen? No, it came up for all of Egypt. But where was it a little different? when it says the children of the promise were being delivered, and what happened? One of the plagues was what? Darkness. Y'all think it was just dark when it was supposed to be dark? No. It was probably dark when it was supposed to be light. And it says that it was such darkness that it could be felt. And so here you have a basic principle that everybody got Sunday. But the promise was, my children, I will protect you from these plagues. That was the promise, that I will protect my children from the plagues. And what was the plague? In this case, it was literally to break a principle. This is what the Father is capable and able to do. And so let's look at Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. Again, to help us understand some basic principles. We just talked about this. So it says, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the earth came to be formless and empty. And darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. And Elohim said, let light come to be. And light came to be. You look at that in Hebrew, it's basically, it says, let light. All them extra words in there. It wasn't like he had to think about it. Well, light had to kind of make a decision. Do I want to shine? Maybe kind of, sort of. No, light. And so, let's go now to verse 4. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning. These principles were placed in the earth. Sun is rising on the wicked and the good. Doesn't make any distinction. One of the most straightforward principles we see is this day and night example. Another one is simple sowing and reaping. And so let's look at that. Let's look at that real quick. That is skipping down to verse 11 and 12. And it says, and Elohim said, let the earth bring forth grass, the plant that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it came to be so. And Elohim brought forth grass, and the earth brought forth grass, the plant that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit. Those seeds, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. And so when you think about this, you can work for, earn, produce, create, etc., a principle. Because you can sow and reap. You can sow apple seeds and grow apple tree. I guess that's how it works, right? Eventually. Doesn't just happen overnight. It's a process, right? But the principle, if you continue to work the principle, if it gets what it needs, it doesn't base it on if you are saved or not. It's a principle. Promise is beyond this. Promise is beyond whether you can stay within the confines of the principle or not. It allows privileges beyond those expected even from the principle. So we can expect Yahweh to do exceedingly and abundantly above. He can go so far beyond based on what? A promise. That he can take a man who is 99 years of age, have him circumcised, allow him to have a child with a woman who's beyond childbearing years. Beyond. and then tell him that he will be the father of many nations. It's a promise. It's beyond principle. He's gone beyond even the basics of what he's put in the earth. And so Leviticus chapter 26, let's look at promise. Let's start with Deuteronomy 29 and 29. And one of my favorite scriptures, because this inheritance that we're speaking of is spoken of right here. And it says, the secret matters belong to Yahweh, our Elohim. It means he knows everything. But what is revealed belongs to us and to our children forever. Hallelujah. To do all the words of this Torah. These secret matters allows us to walk in his Torah. And it's an inheritance that we pass to our children. It goes beyond principle. There is a principle involved, which is you sow, you reap. If you sow that promise to your children, if you teach your children, then they will continue to reap that Torah that was given to them. So there's still an element of principle involved. But we are sons and daughters, and we go beyond simply a member of the human race. Let's look at Leviticus, Vayikra 26, chapter 9 through 13, looking at promise. Promise going beyond simple principle. Leviticus chapter 26, verse 19. I'm going to try real quick to see if I can get the Zoom share going again. It's in and out because my connection is weak. Let's see. I think I've got it back. 1 second. Continue on. Okay. All right, our Zoomers are back with us. Zoomers. Yes, I did just say Zoomers. All right. Leviticus chapter 26, verse 9 through 13. And it says, and I shall turn to you and make you fruitful, and shall increase you, and shall establish my covenant with you. Covenant. This is a little bit further than just simply a principle. Verse 10 says, and you shall eat the old supply, and clear out the old because of the new. This is starting to get beyond just regular principle.
Yes. Yes.
Because he's saying this is an overflowing abundance here. This is not normal. Verse 11 says, and I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. Guess what, y'all? There is sin that lives within us. And this mighty Elohim can't be in the presence of sin. But here he goes beyond the normal principle that he cleanses all sin with his very presence. And he wraps himself in a body that can tolerate sin. Just so we can become perfect. He exchanges our unclean blood for his. This is beyond normal principle. What's the principle? You sinned, you died. But he's allowing us, this is a miracle. We don't look at it like that. But verse 11 is a miracle. He says, and I shall set my dwelling place in your midst. But he didn't just stop there. He says, and guess what, y'all? My being shall not reject you. In other words, my being is supposed to reject you.
Right. Right.
But I make a promise to you. Even though you find yourself in a foreign land, even though you find yourself in sin, even though you find yourself in the ways of the world, I promise that I will be here, waiting for you. And that when you come back into my presence, I won't reject you. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. Verse 12, and I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people. We've just moved past friends. This is family. Verse 13, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from being their slaves, and I have broken the bars of your yoke, and made you walk upright. These are principles. Promises. This is so much different. A child of a principle. Simply, it rains on the just and the unjust. The sun rises on the righteous as well as the wicked. But a child of the promise is something totally different. People often get these two concepts confused. You know, case in point, if you don't have a mega-sized church, then you must not be doing something right. Case in point, if you don't have a big house, then you're not blessed. Case in point, if you can't drive whatever car you want to, then you're not living up to the king's standard. You're the son and daughter of a king, then you should be able to drive a Bentley if you want to. At least that's what Creflo Dollar said. I mean, you know, person who's made a multi-millionaire off the backs of people who make $30,000 a year. Yep. So people often get principle and promise confused. So they look at the results of a principle and they assume that must be the child of promise. Because look, how else would they be so wealthy? How else would they be so attractive? And how else would they be so successful? Or how else would they be so talented? There's a difference between promise and principle. Let's not get them confused. Let's not get them confused. And so let's look at a few scriptures here. So here's the thing. You got to understand that being a part of the promise is up to us. Being a part of the promise is up to us. Now, if we look at the two, principle is about stewardship. It's about stewardship. It really is. You know, what are you doing to get the result that you're getting? Because that basic principle exists in the earth in such a way that we can't even fully comprehend it. Think about it. Yahweh spoke and things happened. His word was the seed that went forth to bring forth life. That which is intangible created all that is tangible. And that was a principle. He spoke and it became. He spoke and it was. It's a principle. And so even in that, we have to understand that principle. And here's why. We're going to go through these scriptures. Here's why. Being a child of the promise does not make you immune to the results of principles. Let me repeat that. Being a child of promise does not make you immune to the results of principles. So just because you are the king's child and you live in the king's house doesn't mean that when you do bad things, you ain't gonna get your butt whooped. You're gonna get your butt whooped. And if you find yourself doing the things in principle, sowing bad seed, you find yourself sowing bad seed, you will reap a bad harvest and still be a child of promise. You can mismanage health and die saved. You can mismanage money and die broke. You can mismanage time and die frustrated. It's a principle. Being a child of promise does not make you immune to what happens when you do the principles. Now Yahweh, again, we just said he's able to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that we ask or think. This is where it comes in, his grace, when he says, even though you deserve death, even though you have earned it, even though you have sown it, I am going to stay the hand of the enemy. I am going to stay the hands of this reaping that is supposed to come your way. So we have to understand that, because sometimes we get caught up in thinking, well, I'm a child of God. I can do that. I can do that. The Bible say I'm going to handle scorpions. Go get me one. It say venomous snakes. I'm going to go get one. I'm going to go find me one. No. No. The Bible say I can do this and do this and do it over and over and over and over and over again. And he's going to protect me. Please understand that a child of promise can work a principle, good or bad. Good or bad. So let's go through. Let's go through these scriptures. Let's start at Colossians. And I'm sorry for the Zoom people on Zoom. It won't stay connected. It just continues to disconnect. So I know you can't see the screen, but I'll call out the scriptures. Ain't nothing fancy up there, so just look for right now Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3, and we're going to read verse 23 through 25. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 through 25. And it reads, "And whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the master, and not to men, knowing that from the master you shall receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the master Messiah you serve. But he who does wrong shall be repaid for the wrong which he has done. And there is no partiality." That's what I just said. Just because you're a child of the promise does not mean you do not get the results of the principle. And so what he's saying here is he will go beyond for you. Because it could be a scenario where if you're working something and the man is not giving you the result that the principle should, that you're not getting the recognition that you should, that Yahweh says, I can go beyond that. Because your reward is from him. So he can go beyond what man can do. Don't get it twisted. Don't let that mean that I can do wrong and be repaid right.
Okay.
Nope. So let's look at Ephesians now. Ephesians chapter 6. We're looking at Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to read verses 5 through 8. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 5 through 8. And it reads, "Servants, obey your masters according to the flesh, with fear and trembling in sincerity of heart, as to Messiah, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Messiah, doing the desire of Elohim from the inner self, rendering service with pleasure as to the master, and not to men, knowing that whatever good anyone does, he shall receive the same from the master, which is whether he is slave or free, reigns on the just and the unjust." Now, what is the slave? Does the slave get inheritance? No. That goes beyond principle. Let's look at Isaiah. We're looking at Isaiah chapter 55. Isaiah chapter 55, we're going to look at verse 11 here in Isaiah chapter 55. And it reads, "So is my word that goes forth from my mouth. It does not return to me empty, but shall do what I please, and shall certainly accomplish what I sent it for."
Yeah.
Yahweh being the creator, he can take the principle and flip it. He can take something that's meant to happen, like the sun's supposed to come up and be shining, and cause such thick black darkness that it can be felt, but not in Goshen. Because they were children of promise. His word is going to go forth and it's going to accomplish whatever he says it will.
Right. Right.
When he speaks, what is he doing? Sowing. When the thing happens, that is like a harvest. Guess what? We were made in his image. That's why we have to be careful what we sow. AKA, we have to be careful what we say.
Right.
Because we are sowing when we speak. We are sowing. Everybody get that? When we speak, we are sowing. Let's look at Ecclesiastes. We're going to look at Ecclesiastes chapter 11. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 6. And it says, "Sow your seed in the morning, and until evening. Do not let your hand rest, since you do not know which prosper, this or that, or whether both alike are good." That's why we have to be careful what we sow. Also, what we say. Because we never know when it's that thing that we spoke that brings forth 100-fold.
Wow.
And we've spoken it, we've said it, we've created it. The principle is at work. And now what do we need? We need Yahweh to come through and undo the principle
Right.
because of what we've sown.
Yeah.
But remember, just because you're a child of the promise does not make you immune to the results of the principle. We're not immune to it. We are not exempt. There is no box. Everybody has seen that box. Are you tax exempt? Does anybody ever check that box? I ain't never checked that box. I ain't never checked that box. That box is on stuff. Are you exempt? Silence. We're not exempt from the principles just because we're children of the promise. Let's look at Job. Job. We're going to look at Job chapter 4. Job chapter 4. verse 8. Job chapter 4, verse 8. And it says, according to what I have seen, those who plow wickedness and sow suffering reap the same. So you're telling me you can't plow wickedness and sow suffering and reap juices and berries. Don't work like that. Or tulips and dandelions, roses. No, don't quite work like that. If we plow wickedness and sow suffering, we reap the same. Children of the promise are not exempt or immune from the results of the principles that we ourselves have worked. Jeremiah chapter 4. We're going to read verses 1 through 4 for this. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 1 through 4. And it says, if you do return, O Israel, declares Yahweh, return to me, and if you remove your abominations from my presence and cease straying, stop sowing wickedness, and shall swear, as Yahweh lives, in truth, in right ruling, and in righteousness, then nations shall bless themselves in him, and they shall boast in him. For this is what Yahweh said to the men of Yehuda and Yerushalayim, break up your tillable ground, and do not sow among thorns. Why? Because if you sow among thorns, you will reap among thorns. Verse 4, circumcise yourselves unto Yahweh, and take away the foreskins of your hearts, you men of Yehuda, and inhabitants of Yerushalayim, lest my wrath come forth like fire, and burn with none to quench it, because of the evil of your deeds. Because of the evil of your deeds. And so we go back to Leviticus 26, 9 through 13. We go back there. Why? Because that is telling us right there what it means to be a child of the promise. Please don't give away your inheritance. Don't give away your position. It belongs to you. It is yours. It is yours. Don't give it away. As we read down, we've already read it, I'll read it again. And I shall turn to you and make you fruitful, and shall increase you, and shall establish my covenant with you. And you shall eat the old supply, and clear out the old because of the new. And I shall set my dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. And I shall walk in your midst, and shall be your Elohim, and you shall be my people. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim from being their slaves. And I have broken the bars of your yoke, and made you upright. Now, I stopped at verse 13, but look at 14. 14 says, but if you do not obey me, and do not do all these commands, and if you reject my laws, or if your being loathes my right rulings, so that you do not do all my commands, but break my covenant, so you decide that you are not a part of this covenant, then, guess what? I also do this to you. And I shall appoint sudden alarm over you, wasting disease and inflammation, destroying the eyes and consuming the life. And you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. Isn't the principle that you sow and then you reap? Well, in this case, he's saying you're going to sow there will be a harvest that you won't reap. Just like he will go against his principle for us as children of promise, he will go against his principle against us. So as children of promise, it's not a given. It's not an automatic. I love my children. But they know that there's a certain way that they have to behave. It's not good enough that they're just my children. If they were wayward, if they were disrespectful, if they were, in a place where they just said, well, I don't care, Ephraim now, he's big as I am. If he decides, well, Dad, I can go out here and do this on my own. I don't need you. I'm going to give him a couple chances to take that back. And then I'm going to help pack his bag, open the door, confiscate my key, change the alarm code, and let him walk on out. It's not enough that he's, well, I'm born of you, you should be sending me stuff. Y'all tell me this. With the prodigal son, when he realized where he was, did he message for his dad to send him some stuff? Hey Dad, I done ran out. Send me some more stuff. What did he have to do to get back into the promise? Go back to the house. He had to go back to the house. He had to reposition himself as a son. See, he gave it up. He took his inheritance because he said, hey, you owe me this, you're going to give it to me. Why wait till you die? Give it to me now. Give it to me now, because I'm more concerned about that than I am the fact that you're still alive and providing for me. I want my stuff so that I can go do what I want to do. He chose to leave the promise. And when he did, he got straight principle. You sow, you'll reap. And when he found himself there eating with the pigs, he says, my father has servants who eat better than I do. I need to go back home. I need to go back home. And so we as children of promise can't ever take for granted whether it's understanding principle and operating appropriately in it, being a good steward, understanding that what we sow, we reap, but we also recognize the great privilege that exists when Yahweh allows us to be in his house. Because with that comes a promise. And not everybody's entitled. We are sons and daughters. And being sons and daughters, we are heirs and joint heirs with Messiah to the promise. Let's not throw it away. Let's not sell it. Let's not give it away. And let's not squander it. Hallelujah.
Yeah.